Hi, I'm Ellie, and if you didn't know, I live in Sydney and I love the place. I have spent many days soaking up this beautiful city, so I thought I would compile my locals guide to Sydney. If you're here for my wellness videos, then don't worry, Wilder Wellness will be back Friday. But I also love travel, and since I can't travel at the moment, I thought I could at least help other people plan their upcoming trips. I'm Ellie Wilder, and you're watching Wilder in Motion. I'm going to mention more places than you could visit in one trip to Sydney, but I've tried to appeal to a variety of interests. There will be links to everything in the description. So let's start with getting here. You'll most probably land at Kingsford Smith Airport, and there's two main ways to get to your accommodation from here: taxi/rideshare or train. Now, the first thing you should know is transport is not cheap in Sydney, but in this case, a train is normally the cheaper option and the station is connected to the airport. You'll need to get an Opal card from the station. You can use this to access all public transport across Sydney. Just make sure you tap on and off every single time. I'll talk more about the different types of transport a little later on. As for accommodation, Sydney has plenty going around to suit every budget and travel style. Don't forget to check Airbnb. I highly recommend you stay in the CBD area, preferably close to a light rail stop or train station. My favorite part of Sydney is the Rocks, and you should definitely spend at least one full day here. It can be accessed easily by walking from the CBD or by light rail or train to Circular Quay. Here are just a few of the activities that can be done in the Rocks. Brunch at a cute cafe. Pancakes on the Rocks is essential for pancake lovers. Buy a trinket from a local artist at the Saturday markets. Stroll along the harbour. Take some compulsory photos with the harbour bridge in the background. Have dinner at renowned fine dining restaurant Quay. Or if you're more into pub food, then Squire's Landing is a good choice. Both have spectacular views of the bridge and the Opera House. Art lovers can explore the MCA. It's also air conditioned and has public toilets. Art galleries are free to enter in New South Wales except for exhibitions. Go on a harbour cruise. Now, here is a great money-saving hack. Avoid commercial operators. Instead, use your Opal card to catch a commuter ferry. Alight at another interesting part of Sydney or do a loop. I will talk more on that later. Grab a bite to eat or a souvenir along the foreshore. Aria is another fine dining spot. Keep an eye out for the gold plaques along the ground showing the 1788 shoreline. Take some Opera House snaps, and if you want to go inside, book a tour or see a show. Watch the sunset at the Opera Bar. Step into nature at the Royal Botanical Gardens just around the corner. There are so many areas to explore. Take photos or stop for a picnic. I could easily spend several hours here. Continue on to find Mrs. Macquarie's chair and the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Again, free to enter. Take a history walking tour through the area to visit some of the original buildings and learn about the city's history. Take a peek inside Old Customs House to see a 3D model of Sydney with koi fish sculptures swimming through the buildings. This is also home to Cafe Sydney, another fine dining spot. Another area I want to talk about is Town Hall and surrounds. Town Hall train station sits beneath my favourite building in the city, the Queen Victoria Building, known by locals as the QVB. The architecture makes you feel like you've stepped into the 1930s, with brilliant details in the tiles, clocks, and even the toilets. It is also a shopping centre and hosts many high-end as well as locally owned stores for your browsing. The building is also decked out seasonally. At Christmas, it is a must-see. If shopping is your thing, continue walking through the basement level and you'll reach Westfield Sydney and Pitt Street Mall, which host major retailers. A short walk from here will lead you to Martin Place, the centre of Sydney. Here you can have a moment with the aptly titled Sydney Siege Memorial Reflection and the Sydney Cenotaph War Memorial. And history buffs must go inside the post office and venture to the basement floor where they will find the remains of Sydney's tank stream, which was once the city's primary supply of fresh water. Let's talk about beaches. Now, we've all heard of Bondi and it's definitely worth a visit. You can walk along the mural wall or go for a dip. Personally, I would give Iceberg's Sea Pool a pass because you can swim in the ocean for free. I also recommend you take a scenic stroll along the headline to the less crowded Bronte or Tamarama beaches. Do this in October and you'll pass many outdoor installations as part of Sculpture by the Sea. There are certainly more beaches in Sydney, but these are most likely closest to where you'll be staying. Be warned, locals love the beach too, and hot weekends equals crowded beaches, so time your beach day accordingly. And whatever you do, swim between the red and yellow flags. Other notable locations. Now, I spoke before about catching a commuter ferry, and Taronga Zoo is one of the locations I recommend you alight. Now, I know that there are zoos everywhere in the world, but I have such great memories of this one. It also has brilliant views of the Sydney skyline. To get closer to the animals, head west to Featherdale Wildlife Park. If you're into the thrills, then you could also catch a ferry to Luna Park. If you're up for a longer ride, then head to Manly. There's plenty of less touristy beaches in the area, and there's the old quarantine station. Now, I'm not crazy about history, but I found this day out fascinating. It seems like every city must have either a Ferris wheel or a tall tower which to observe the city from, and Sydney is no exception. But Sydney Tower Eye is not your typical tourist trap. It's actually pretty reasonably priced. Be sure to book online for a discount, and you can see as far as the Blue Mountains on clear days. It really gives you a sense of how Sydney is nestled in National Park. Sydney Bridge Climb. I haven't done this yet, but it's on my bucket list. It costs between $200 and $400, so it's definitely a splurge. A budget alternative is visiting the Pylon Lookout. Speaking of the bridge, it's essential you cross it. For interesting views of the structure, sit in the passenger seat of a car and look up. It is pretty spectacular. Or if you're crossing by train, then be sure to go on the top level. You can of course walk or cycle the bridge, but your views will be somewhat inhibited by the safety barriers. Sydney hosts sports, musicals, ballets, operas, plays, everything you can think of. So if you're interested in one of these things, then be sure to check out what's on when you're in Sydney. Darling Harbour is another interesting part of Sydney. It's very family friendly, there's plenty of restaurants and attractions, and it's also a great place to start a walk around to Barangaroo, where you can even dip your feet in the harbour. And if you want, you can follow the harbour all the way to the rocks. Onto festivals and events. I'm told Sydney hosts over 100 festivals per year, so be sure to check out what's on when you're in town. Some of my favourites are Vivid Light Festival in May. Be sure to go on a weeknight. Sydney Film Festival, showcasing old and new blockbuster and art house films. Sydney Royal Easter Show. This is an absolute must-see if you're visiting in Easter. Be sure to go on a weekday, and you must plan your day in advance, otherwise you'll miss some of the timed events and displays. Sydney Fringe Comedy Festival takes place all across Sydney, often in more intimate venues, which for some reason makes everything so much funnier. And the Smooth Chocolate Festival. Need I say more? Another iconic aspect of Sydney and Australia in general is the iconic flora and fauna, so here are my tips for escaping the concrete jungle. There's plenty of walking tracks just tucked off the main parts of Sydney, often taking you along the coast, short strolls to hidden beaches. If you only do one thing on my list, this is my #1 recommendation. Take a half-day trip on a ferry to one of the islands on Sydney Harbour. Plenty of them have their own historical buildings, local restaurants, and peaceful coves for you to enjoy. The Blue Mountains deserves several days. However, if you can't fit it in, you can escape to the bush without leaving Sydney. Catch the train south to Royal National Park or north to Barrow Valley National Park, where you can explore hikes of all different lengths and difficulties. If you do go north, it's worth catching the train all the way to Hawkesbury River Station. Look out the window and you'll see more of suburban Sydney and what life is like for a typical Sydney sider. Hawkesbury River has stunning, tranquil scenery. You can catch a ferry out to Dangar Island, or if you're up for a bigger trip, then get on the riverboat postman and help deliver the post to the residents of the various islands. In terms of nightlife, Sydney has plenty of bars, pubs and clubs. Since the introduction of lockout laws curbing the sale of alcohol in King's Cross, partying has shifted to lockout-free areas like Newtown, Darlinghurst and Bondi. Newtown is part of the Inner West, which is a quirky and artistic neighbourhood that is well worth exploring by day as well. So let me go into a little more detail about transport. There are 5 public transport options: train, light rail, which is basically trams, buses, ferries, and metro. You can access these using your Opal card, which you can get from a news agency. It's really quite expensive, but it is capped at $50 a week, after which trips are free. But beware, trains and buses can be particularly unreliable and prone to delays the second it starts raining. So use Google Maps to plan your trips and keep track of delays. Other transport options include taxis, ride-sharing services, dockless bikes, and of course, walking. A few other tips. Make sure you check the weather every day because it can frequently drop 10 degrees overnight. The worst of bushfire season is November to February, and Sydney can get covered in smoke. And for this reason, I think the best time to visit is September to October. It's also nice and warm, but it's not unbearably hot, and it's a bit less touristy too. Just be sure to avoid the New South Wales September school holidays. A lot of places in Sydney are no smoking and no vaping, particularly in or near food vendors, including outdoor dining areas, shops, parks, and train stations. Tipping is not expected here, but a lot of establishments have a tip jar, so if you want to chuck your change in there, you can. And finally, wear sunscreen. Even if you're not going to the beach, you do not want to get sunburnt on your first day and spend the rest of your holiday in pain. Well, I feel like that was a pretty comprehensive list. I really hope this helps you plan your holidays and lets you know about some of the cute little spots in Sydney that you don't necessarily know about. If you are a Sydney local, please comment below what I missed because I'm always looking to have new fun experiences in this city. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want more videos like this or you want to tune into some of my wellness videos, well then make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.